You just had a dream about a talking cat in ancient Egypt. That was breaking news. Your nightly visions were not dismissed as random brain static. They were urgent dispatches from the gods themselves, meticulously recorded on papyrus and carved into temple walls. This is the bizarre world of Egyptian dream records. By the end of this, you will understand how an entire civilization built a system of meaning around the chaos of sleep. We are going to explore why a nightmare was considered a demonic attack, and how dreaming of a crocodile could be the best news you got all week. What do you think your strangest dream would have meant to an Egyptian priest? Buried in the dry sands near the workers' village of Deir el-Medina lies a practical guide to the spirit world. This is the Dream Book of the scribe Kenhirkhopeshef, a papyrus scroll that served as an ancient interpreter's manual for the common person. Its structure is beautifully straightforward, a testament to the Egyptian desire for order, even in sleep. Dreams are listed in two simple columns, one labeled good and the other bad, with a direct interpretation written beside each one. It is a stark, no-nonsense system for decoding the nightly messages from the gods. The entries themselves, however, are anything but ordinary. To our modern minds, they seem delightfully strange. According to the book, if you dream of drinking warm beer, you will suffer. Dream of drinking cold beer, however, and good fortune is on its way. Seeing a large cat in your sleep was an excellent omen, predicting a bountiful harvest. But if you dreamed of your own teeth falling out, the book delivered a chillingly bad verdict, a sign of impending death for someone in your household. These interpretations were not abstract poetry. They were concrete predictions meant for daily life. An artisan worried about his health, a farmer anxious about his crops, a young person curious about love. All could consult this book to understand what their subconscious visions were trying to tell them about their future. The scribe who compiled this manual, Kenhirkhopeshef, was not a high priest in a remote temple. He lived in the village of the tomb builders, a practical man of letters surrounded by craftsmen and their families. This context is crucial. His dream book was likely a working document, a reference text copied and shared to meet a real, everyday demand for answers. It represents a democratization of divine communication, where the mysteries of the night were translated into actionable advice for the average Egyptian. So the next time you have a puzzling dream, consider what Kenhirkhopeshef might have written in his columns. Would your vision be filed under good or under bad? This simple binary, however, was just the first step. Once a dream's nature was determined, the real work began, because a bad dream was not just a prediction, it was a threat that demanded an immediate and powerful response. A nightmare for a commoner was a personal warning, but a dream for a pharaoh could change the course of history. The most legendary example comes not from an Egyptian papyrus, but from a story shared across cultures, the tale of Pharaoh's prophetic dreams in the biblical book of Genesis. This account, whether viewed as sacred history or powerful folklore, perfectly captures the Egyptian understanding of royal dreams as a divine hotline. Pharaoh dreams first of 7 fat, healthy cows emerging from the Nile, only to be devoured by 7 gaunt, sickly cows. He then dreams of 7 plump ears of grain consumed by 7 thin, blighted ears. His own priests and wise men are baffled. The interpretation, provided by the Hebrew interpreter Joseph, is not about personal fate but national survival. The dreams are a direct economic prophecy from the gods, forecasting 7 years of incredible agricultural abundance, followed by 7 years of catastrophic famine. The entire nation's strategy for the next 14 years, the building of granaries and the stockpiling of food, hinges on decoding this symbolic nightmare. This was the ultimate high-stakes dream analysis, where the health of the kingdom literally depended on listening to the message. Egyptian inscriptions confirmed this was not just a foreign story, but a core part of their own royal ideology. Pharaohs documented dreams where gods like Horus or Ammon appeared to them, not to discuss beer or cats, but to deliver crucial military intelligence or divine sanction for their rule. A stela from the reign of Thutmose IV tells of the young prince, before he was king, dreaming while resting by the great Sphinx. The god Harmachis, embodied by the Sphinx, appears to him, promising the throne if he clears away the sand engulfing the monument. This dream was a political contract carved in stone, used to legitimize his claim to power. Another pharaoh might receive a dream vision on the eve of battle, with a god outlining the perfect strategy to crush an enemy. For the ruler, sleep was not an escape from duty, but another chamber of state where the gods delivered their counsel. The interpretation was immediate, and its consequences vast, mobilizing armies, shaping foreign policy, and legitimizing dynasties. While a villager's dream book helped navigate a harvest or a family illness, the pharaoh's dream journal was a log of divine directives for steering civilization itself. This raises a profound question: if dreams were messages, who exactly was sending them, and what happened if the message was hostile? But what if you needed a dream on demand, a specific message from the divine for a pressing problem? For that, you would check into a divine clinic, a practice known as incubation. This was not passive sleep. It was an active, ritualized quest for a cure or a prophecy. People suffering from illness, infertility, or impossible dilemmas would travel to sacred temples dedicated to gods known for their healing power, like Serapis or the deified architect Imhotep. They would undergo days of purification, bathing in sacred waters and making offerings to the deity. Then, in a special chamber within the temple precinct, often near the statue of the god itself, they would lie down to sleep on a sacred animal skin, hoping the god would visit them in the night. The dream that followed was considered a direct consultation, a divine prescription, and some of these prescriptions were, to put it mildly, extremely bizarre. One recorded account tells of a man with a wounded eye who was told in his dream to grind up the mineral malachite with grease and apply it as a salve. Another was instructed to create a poultice made from honey and, astonishingly, lizard dung, to heal a persistent sore. To us, this sounds like a nightmare recipe, but to the patient, it was a sacred formula delivered straight from the source. The logic was unshakable. If the god commanded it in a vision, it must work. This practice of incubation shows the ultimate faith in dreams as a two-way street. You could not only interpret the dreams you had, you could deliberately enter a sacred space and request one. It turns the dream from a mysterious broadcast into a scheduled appointment. The most famous royal example of this proactive dream-seeking brings us back to the Dream Stela of Thutmose IV. While not a medical incubation, the principle is identical. The young prince did not just stumble upon the Sphinx and take a nap. He was almost certainly engaging in a ritual act, seeking divine favor or clarity about his uncertain future. By sleeping in that powerful, sand-choked space between the paws of the half-buried colossus, he was placing himself in the direct path of the god's influence. His dream of the Sphinx, Harmachis, offering him the throne in exchange for restoration, was the ultimate successful incubation. He asked for a sign, and he received a kingdom. So whether you were a commoner with a festering wound or a prince with political ambitions, the temple offered a direct line. But this entire system of belief, from village dream books to royal prophecies to incubated prescriptions, rested on one colossal assumption: that dreams were real. What happened, then, when the line between the dreaming world and the waking world began to blur in the most terrifying way possible? A nightmare was more than a bad dream. It was a physical and spiritual assault. In the quiet of the night, the Egyptians believed malevolent forces crossed the thin veil between worlds to torment the vulnerable sleeper. These entities, which we might loosely translate as demons, were called the Aku, the malevolent dead, or the Sebau, chaotic spirits of darkness. They did not symbolize your anxiety, they were the cause of it, crawling into your bed to bring sickness, paralysis, and dread. The feeling of a heavy weight on your chest, the sensation of being choked or suffocated in your sleep, this was not sleep paralysis to them. It was the direct, chilling touch of a demon. One surviving account describes a dreamer feeling a dark, oppressive figure sitting upon him, draining his breath and his strength, an experience explicitly named as an attack by an Aku. In the face of such a tangible threat, passive interpretation was not enough. You needed active defense, a nightly security system woven from magic. The ancient Egyptian bedroom was a fortress, and its first line of defense was often the very object that cradled your head. Headrests, Those curved stands made of wood or stone were frequently inscribed with protective spells and images of guardian gods. Laying your head upon one was like activating a charm, the incantations creating an invisible barrier around your mind as you slept. Beside the bed, you might place a statue or amulet of the dwarf god Bes, his fierce, leonine face and sticking-out tongue designed to scare away any evil spirit that dared approach. His role was that of a divine bouncer for the bedroom, repelling nightmares before they could begin. For those who suffered recurrent attacks, a more personalized solution existed: the original dream catcher. A priest or scribe would write a specific protective spell onto a small strip of papyrus. This spell often called upon powerful deities like Isis or Horus to extend their protection over the dreamer, to bind the Sebau demons, and to ensure peaceful, untroubled sleep. This charged papyrus was then carefully placed beneath the sleeper's pillow, transforming the bed into a sacred, shielded space. Every night was a minor battle, and these objects were the armor and weapons. This profound belief that dreams were real encounters explains why a recorded nightmare was treated with such seriousness. It was not a diary entry. It was a medical and spiritual report, evidence of a breach in your personal defenses that required ritual repair. So while we might dismiss a bad dream as indigestion or stress, an Egyptian would have seen it as a sign that their magical safeguards needed reinforcing, a reminder that the darkness was not empty, but watchful. And if an individual's dreams could be such a battleground, what happened when the entire civilization began to dream a different dream, when the old gods grew quiet and new voices filled the night? The crocodile was a creature of pure terror along the Nile, a living nightmare that could snatch a person in an instant. Yet in the strange logic of the dream books, to see one in your sleep was often a powerfully good sign. It meant you were under divine protection, that your enemies would be crushed as easily as the crocodile crushed its prey. This reversal is the key to understanding Egyptian dream symbolism, where meaning was never literal, but always filtered through the lens of myth and daily observation. The crocodile was sacred to the god Sobek, a deity of ferocious power and royal might. To dream of his sacred animal was to borrow that power, a promise that you would be the one doing the devouring, not the one being devoured. Contrast this with the humble donkey. In reality, a beast of burden essential for transport and labor, but in a dream, it was almost always a bad omen. It symbolized stupidity, stubbornness, and base instincts. Dreaming of riding a donkey might predict a foolish mistake, while seeing a dead one could ironically signal a relief from burdensome ignorance. The animal's value in life was completely inverted in the symbolic world of sleep. This symbolic code extended to the entire menagerie of the Nile. If you dreamed of a falcon soaring high in the sky, it was an excellent portent of rising social status or spiritual elevation, a direct borrowing from the god Horus, the celestial falcon king. But if you saw a goose dying or in distress, it could predict a coming illness in the family. The goose was a common food source and a symbol of fertility, so its suffering in a dream pointed to a threat against health and provision. One of the most intriguing symbols was the baboon. Associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, a dreaming encounter with a baboon, especially if it spoke to you, meant you were about to receive profoundly wise counsel or an important message. The animal's real-life chattering was reinterpreted as divine discourse. Every interpretation was a puzzle piece connecting three worlds: the animal's behavior in nature, its role in Egyptian mythology, and its practical function in human society. A scorpion's sting in a dream might not mean physical pain, but the sting of a betrayal, because the scorpion goddess Serapis was also a protector against venomous words. This system allowed the dream interpreters to take the chaotic, personal imagery of a dream and plug it into a shared cultural database of meaning. So the next time you recall a dream filled with animals, ask yourself not what they are, but what they represent. Is that snake a threat, or is it the uraeus on the pharaoh's brow, a symbol of royal authority? The answer lies not in the creature itself, but in the story the culture told about it. And if animals could carry such layered messages, what about the dreams that featured the most powerful symbols of all? The gods themselves walking and talking in the minds of sleepers. For an Egyptian, dreaming of a god was not a metaphor, It was a documented meeting. While most dreams were symbolic messages to be decoded, these were direct audiences, where a deity stepped out of the temple and into the sleeper's mind to deliver clear instructions or healing. These experiences were so profound that people paid to have them carved in stone for all to see. These votive stelae, left at temples as offerings of thanks, are our most personal records of divine contact. One man, named Deir, dedicated a stela after the god Thoth, the divine scribe and healer, appeared to him in a dream and cured a terrible illness that human doctors could not touch. Another records a woman named Tamhodep, who prayed to the god Imhotep for a son, and after a dream where the god granted her wish, she bore a child and erected a monument in gratitude. These were not vague feelings upon waking. They were specific, life-altering events with a clear before and after, worthy of permanent public testimony. Perhaps the most fascinating account involves an artist and his chisel. A sculptor working on a statue found himself stuck, unable to capture the proper majesty of the figure. In desperation, he prayed for guidance. That night, the creator god Ptah, the patron of craftsmen, visited his dream. But Ptah did not just offer encouragement, he gave a step-by-step technical lesson. The god reportedly showed the sculptor exactly how to hold his tools, where to strike the stone, and how to shape the features to achieve perfection. The sculptor awoke, followed the divine blueprint, and the resulting statue was hailed as a masterpiece, a work believed to carry the actual touch of the god within it. This story blurs every line we hold dear, between dreaming and waking, between human skill and divine inspiration, between an idea and a physical creation summoned from a vision. These direct encounters held an authority that no priestly decree or dream book entry could match. If a god told you to do something in a dream, you did it, and no one could argue. It provided ultimate personal justification, a sacred mandate that bypassed all human hierarchy. This is why these experiences were meticulously recorded. They were legal and spiritual documents proving your actions were divinely sanctioned. The dream had fully dissolved into a vision, a waking reality that happened in the sleeping mind. It makes you wonder, in a world where the gods were that present, was sleeping the most alert state of all? Dreams could also be a private channel for the heart's deepest desires. Beyond prophecies and protection, the dream records reveal a world where sleep was a canvas for romance and a tool for attraction. In the quiet of night, an individual might not seek a cure or a prophecy, but a glimpse of a future spouse or the touch of a beloved. This intimate dimension of dreaming was so powerful that it spawned its own branch of magic, a collection of spells designed to harness the dream state for matters of love. Surviving magical papyri contain detailed instructions for rituals meant to send a dream lover to someone's bedside. A person, often with the help of a practitioner, would create a figurine, speak incantations to a specific god like Hathor, the goddess of love, and then destroy or bury the object with the command that the target would dream of them, feel irresistible desire, and seek them out upon waking. The dream itself was the delivery method for the enchantment, a Trojan horse of affection slipped into the unconscious mind. For those seeking not to compel, but to discover, dreams offered divine matchmaking. There are accounts, particularly from later periods, of young women performing rituals before sleeping in a temple, hoping the god would reveal the face of their future husband in a dream. This was a sacred form of fortune-telling, where the uncertainty of romance was entrusted to the clarity of a vision. The dream was a preview, a divine endorsement of a path not yet taken. The most profound intersection of love, dreams, and divinity involved the desperate hope for a child. In a society where lineage was everything, fertility was a constant prayer. There are recorded dreams, often from women, of embracing a statue of a god like Min, the deity of virility, or being visited by a goddess. These were not interpreted as literal encounters, but as powerful symbolic acts. To dream of holding a fertility deity was to secure their direct favor, to symbolically receive the divine spark needed for conception. The dream was a ritual of union performed in the spirit realm, with very real hope for consequences in the physical one. This blurs our modern lines completely. Was it a dream, a prayer, or a magical act? For the ancient Egyptians, it was all three simultaneously. The dream state was a permeable border where human longing could reach out and, through symbolism and faith, pull divine power into waking life. The bedroom was not just a fortress against demons, then, but also a sanctuary for summoning love and life itself. If the night could be weaponized for protection and orchestrated for love, it begs the question, what happened when the entire framework for understanding these visions began to crumble? This profound faith in dreams gave them a power we would never grant today, the authority of a courtroom witness. In ancient Egypt, a vivid dream could be entered as legal evidence, a testimony delivered straight from the realm of truth. The principle was rooted in Ma'at, the cosmic order of justice and balance. If the gods or the righteous dead could speak through dreams, then their words carried the weight of Ma'at itself, cutting through human deception and uncertainty. There are fragmentary records, often from village disputes over property or theft, where an individual would testify that the solution came to them in a dream vision. The community and local authorities took such claims with immense seriousness, viewing them not as convenient stories, but as divine subpoenas. This practice reached its most formal and eerie expression at a place called the Oracle of the Dead in Saqqara. Here, near the vast necropolis, seekers would not visit a temple of the great gods, but would instead spend the night in a chamber close to a tomb, often that of a revered sage or a powerful ancestor. The goal was to petition the spirit of the deceased, who, having passed into the realm of the divine, now possessed perfect knowledge and justice. Through the ritual of dream incubation, the sleeper hoped the ancestor would appear and deliver a verdict on a legal dispute, reveal hidden information, or clarify a point of family law. It was the ultimate cold case review, conducted by a ghost in your sleep. One surviving account makes this astonishingly concrete. A man was involved in a dispute over a missing ox, a serious economic loss. The case was at a standstill, with no witnesses and only suspicion. The man then reported a dream in which his deceased father appeared to him, not with vague comfort, but with specific, actionable intelligence. The father's spirit clearly described where the ox had been hidden and even named the thief. Armed with this dream testimony, the man brought his case back before the local authorities. According to the record, the officials acted on this dream evidence, investigated the location, found the ox exactly as described, and secured a conviction. The dream was not a clue. It was the smoking gun, a witness statement from beyond the grave that settled the matter definitively. This legal framework forces us to rethink everything about their reality. A dream was not a private neurological event, it was a potential piece of forensic data, a channel for gathering testimony that the living could not access. It placed ultimate truth in the hands of the invisible world, trusting that the gods and the righteous dead were more honest than any living person. So the next time you struggle to remember a dream, consider that an Egyptian might have been expected to recite theirs under oath, with their property, reputation, or even their freedom hanging in the balance. If a dream could convict a thief, what other pillars of society did this belief support, and what happened when those pillars began to tremble? A king's dream can be a weapon, and for the Kushite pharaoh Tanu, it was the ultimate tool of conquest. His story is carved into the dream stele, a monument that captures a moment of profound political theater. According to the inscription, before his military campaign to reclaim Egypt, Tanu experienced a powerful vision. He dreamed of two serpents, one positioned on his right side and one on his left. Upon waking, he summoned his royal dream interpreters for the official reading. Their verdict was perfect, and undoubtedly exactly what the king hoped to hear. The twin serpents, they declared, were none other than the goddesses Wadjet and Nekabet, the protective deities of Lower and Upper Egypt. Their appearance flanking the king in his sleep was a divine prophecy, a celestial endorsement that he was destined to rule the entire, unified two lands. This was not a private moment of doubt, it was a public relations masterpiece etched in stone. The symbolism was brilliantly precise and deeply rooted in Egyptian iconography. Every pharaoh wore the uraeus, the reared cobra, on his crown. This was Wadjet, the very serpent from the dream, representing royal authority and the lethal power to incinerate the king's enemies with her fiery breath. To dream of two such serpents was to receive a double portion of this sacred mandate. It transformed Tanu from a Kushite ruler from Nubia into the legitimate, God-chosen sovereign of all Egypt, his claim validated in the most intimate and irrefutable way possible, by direct communication from the deities themselves. The dream stele functions as brilliant propaganda. By publicly recording this dream, Tanu was not sharing a personal anecdote. He was publishing his divine job description. It answered any potential critics or rivals before they could even speak, who could argue with a decree delivered by goddesses in the king's own sleep. This narrative served to legitimize his often contested dynasty, providing a spiritual foundation for his political and military actions. Every soldier who marched under his command, every priest who officiated in the temples, and every governor who administered the provinces could point to the stela and see the proof of his rightful place. Tanu story is a powerful echo of Thutmose IV and the Sphinx, but with a crucial, calculated twist. While Thutmose's dream involved a negotiation, a deal with the god to clear the sand for the throne, Tanu dream is a pure presentation. The goddesses simply appear, bestowing their power upon him as a fait accompli. It is a declaration, not a discussion. This highlights the flexibility of the dream narrative as a political tool. It could be framed as a contract, a gift, or a command, depending on what the king needed most. In a world where power was believed to flow from the gods to the pharaoh, a divinely sanctioned dream was the strongest possible currency, a check signed by the cosmos itself. It makes you wonder how many other royal dreams were carefully crafted stories, designed not for the sleeping king, but for the waking ears of his subjects. But the most powerful dream magic was not always private. Sometimes it was carved in stone for the entire community to share. Standing over 6 feet tall in the Metropolitan Museum of Art today is a monument that reads like a divine first aid manual, the Metternich Stela. This massive slab of gray stone is not a royal decree or a battle record. It is a densely packed encyclopedia of protection, covered from top to bottom in intricate images and hieroglyphic spells. Its primary mission was to serve as a magical battery against poison, whether from snake bites, scorpion stings, or the bites of other dangerous creatures. People in need would pour water over the stela's inscribed surface, believing the spells would charge the liquid, which they would then drink as a potent, magical antidote. It was a public utility for healing, a stone apothecary, and woven directly into this tapestry of protective magic are dreams. The texts on the stela recount the childhood of the god Horus, describing how he was poisoned and fell into a death-like sleep. In this vulnerable state, his mother, the goddess Isis, called upon the heavens for help. The stela tells us that the sun god Ra responded by sending Thoth, the god of wisdom, to heal the young Horus through dreams. These were not mere visions, but therapeutic interventions where divine knowledge flowed into the sleeping god to counteract the venom. This story established a direct, sacred link between the dream state and the reversal of poison, providing a mythical blueprint for the stela's own function. This connection suggests the Metternich Stela was likely more than a passive monument. Scholars believe it was almost certainly used in rituals of dream incubation. Imagine a person suffering from a mysterious illness or a terrifying bite coming to this great stone. They might anoint themselves with the charged water, then lie down to sleep nearby, perhaps within a temple courtyard. The goal was to tap into the same curative power that healed the infant Horus, to invite a healing dream directly from Thoth or Isis. The stela itself, humming with inscribed spells and the story of divine recovery, would have been considered a focal point, a conduit that made the temple space especially potent for receiving a diagnostic or curative vision. It represents the ultimate fusion of ideas, monumental, state-sanctioned magic, seamlessly blending with the most personal, desperate act of dream-seeking. The stone served both the waking world, through its enchanted water, and the sleeping world, through its invitation for divine dreams. It tells us that for the Egyptians, there was no firm boundary between medicine, magic, and the messages of the night. A cure could be drunk, or it could be dreamed, and sometimes the dream itself was the most important ingredient in the potion. So who translated the babble of the night into clear instructions? Enter the masters of the secret things, the professional dream interpreters. These were not hobbyists with a book. They were highly trained specialists, often priests of the dream god Serapis or learned temple scribes who had memorized vast libraries of symbolic knowledge. Their title itself, Masters of the Secret Things, tells you everything. They were the gatekeepers of a hidden language, the only ones trusted to decode the divine ciphers sent into the minds of sleepers. A villager with a simple dream might consult a common dream book, but for anything complex, ambiguous, or high stakes, you went to a master. Their process was far more nuanced than just looking up symbols in a list. A true interpreter was a contextual detective. He would first consider the dreamer's social status, because the same symbol meant different things for different people. A farmer dreaming of a broken plow was a disaster, but a priest dreaming of one might symbolize the breaking of a tedious routine. Current events were crucial. Dreaming of a foreign animal during a time of tension with a neighboring kingdom could be a geopolitical warning, not a zoological curiosity. They even factored in astrological signs, believing the position of the stars at the time of the dream could tint its meaning, much like a filter changes the color of a photograph. One famous anecdote recorded by the historian Artemidorus, though from a later period, perfectly captures this sophisticated art. A military general came to an interpreter troubled by a dream. He had seen a giant bronze snake, coiled and menacing. The interpreter did not simply say snake equals enemy. He asked detailed questions, learned the general was planning a siege on a heavily fortified city, and then delivered his verdict. The bronze snake, he explained, was not a living threat, but a symbol of impregnable defense, like the shining, metallic walls of the city itself. To see it in a dream, however, meant the defenses would be revealed to him, and he would conquer it. The general, armed with this interpretation, proceeded with the siege and was victorious. The interpreter's genius was in layering the symbol over the dreamer's specific reality. The master's role, therefore, was as much psychological and spiritual guide as it was technical translator. In a world saturated with omens, where every bird's flight or unusual weather pattern could be a sign, the anxiety of a troubling dream could be paralyzing. The interpreter did not just provide an answer, he provided a path forward, transforming paralyzing mystery into actionable understanding, or at least manageable fear. He was the human bridge between the chaotic divine broadcast and the need for human order, turning the secret things into a plan for tomorrow. A nightmare demanded more than interpretation. It required a ritual cleansing. For the ancient Egyptians, a bad dream was a spiritual contaminant, a stain on the soul that had to be scrubbed away before the sun rose again. The most profound of these cleansing rites was a startling adaptation of a funerary ceremony, the opening of the mouth. In its original form, this elaborate ritual was performed on a mummy or a statue of the deceased, using sacred tools to symbolically restore its senses, allowing the dead to see, hear, eat, and breathe in the afterlife. But in a fascinating twist, this ceremony was also performed for the living after a terrifying dream. A priest or a skilled family member would recite specific spells over the distressed dreamer, using gestures or perhaps a small blade to symbolically open their eyes, ears, and mouth once more. The purpose was not to grant afterlife senses, but to reopen the dreamer's inner channels to the divine, to clear the blockage caused by the demonic nightmare and restore their receptivity to good, prophetic visions. It was a spiritual reset, forcefully reclaiming the dreamer's connection to the gods from the clutches of the chaotic spirits who had invaded their sleep. For those seeking a more direct line of complaint, there was the practice of the dream letter. Imagine waking from a horrifying vision, sitting down with a scrap of papyrus and a reed pen, and formally drafting a letter to a god. This was not a prayer, but a written grievance. The dreamer would detail the nightmare in vivid, accusatory language, describing the torment inflicted by the malicious Aku or Sebau demons, and then demand justice or protection from the deity. The act of writing transformed the nebulous fear into a concrete document, a case file for the divine court, but the ritual did not end with writing. Once the complaint was complete, the papyrus was not sent by post, of course. It was deliberately destroyed, often by burning or dissolving in water. This act was crucial. It symbolically transferred the nightmare's power from the dreamer's mind onto the physical papyrus, and then its destruction annihilated the dream's influence altogether. The nightmare was filed, judged, and executed, all through a potent blend of writing and ritual magic. Perhaps the most beautifully simple of these averting rituals involved nothing more than a clay pot and the dawn light. Upon waking from a bad dream, a person would go to a pot of fresh water at sunrise. Bending close, they would whisper the entire content of the nightmare into the water, pouring out every frightening detail as if confiding in a trusted friend. The water, a universal symbol of purification and life, was believed to absorb the dream's malignant essence. Then, in a final, cathartic act, the dreamer would smash the pot onto the ground. The shattering clay represented the breaking of the dream's hold, and as the water soaked into the earth and evaporated in the morning sun, the nightmare itself was thought to dissipate, its power scattered and neutralized. This practice reveals a deep, intuitive understanding of psychology, giving physical form to a mental terror so it could be physically destroyed. Whether through grand ceremonial adaptation, written accusation, or humble sunrise ritual, the message was clear. A bad dream was not something you just endured. It was an active invasion that you had the power and the sacred duty to repel. The same belief that made dreams evidence in court also made them the perfect plot device for ancient bestsellers. A thrilling story from the later period of Egyptian history, written in the Demotic script, stars the legendary Prince Setni Kamwas, a famed magician and son of a pharaoh. In his adventures, he is not just a hero, but a dreamer. The tale describes Setni's relentless quest for a powerful magical book, hidden in a series of sealed tombs and guarded by formidable spirits. At a critical moment of uncertainty, when the physical path seems lost, Setni does not find a map. He receives a vision in his sleep. A prophetic dream descends upon him, vividly showing him the exact location of the book and the supernatural challenges that await. This is not a random narrative flourish. It is a direct reflection of the culture's deepest convictions. The story treats the dream as the most reliable source of intelligence available, a supernatural GPS provided by the gods to guide the seeker past mortal obstacles. In the fictional world of Setni, just as in the real world of an Egyptian artisan or farmer, the dream is the ultimate insider tip. This popular tale reveals how thoroughly the idea of dreams as divine guidance had penetrated every layer of Egyptian thought, from the sacred rituals of the temple to the thrilling pages of a circulating story. It shows that the audience listening to the tale of Setni would have nodded in understanding, not surprise, when the hero's solution came in a dream. They lived in a world where that was simply how things worked. The night was a source of actionable intelligence, whether you were hunting for a magical artifact or trying to find a lost ox. The Setni stories represent a fascinating blend of adventure, high magic, and practical dream lore, all wrapped up in a compelling package for public entertainment. They prove that the concept was not confined to priests and pharaohs. It was street-level mythology, a shared cultural language where a dream could launch a hero on his quest and keep an audience on the edge of their seats. So if the ancient Egyptians had bookstores, the section on dream interpretation would have been right next to the adventure novels, because in their minds, the two genres were often one and the same. Even the throne itself could be lost in a dream. In the waning years of Egypt's independence, the last native pharaoh, Nectanebo II, faced an empire. The Persian war machine was advancing, and his kingdom's fate hung in the balance. But according to legends recorded by later Greek historians, the decisive blow was not struck on a battlefield. It was delivered in the royal bedchamber. The story goes that Nectanebo experienced a terrifying, prophetic dream. The warrior god Oniris, a divine protector of the kingdom, appeared before him. But the god was not standing guard. He was preparing to leave. In the vision, Oniris was meticulously packing the sacred temple barges, the vessels used to carry divine statues in procession, as if for a long journey. Then, the god turned to the pharaoh and delivered a silent, devastating verdict. He simply held out his hands, showing the pharaoh the vast, empty expanse of his palms. The message was unmistakable. The divine protection that had shielded Egypt for millennia was being withdrawn. The god's hands, once full of power and favor, were now empty. Nectanebo awoke knowing the cause was lost. He interpreted this dream not as a challenge to be overcome, but as a final decree. He gathered his personal treasures and fled the country, escaping to Nubia before the Persian forces could capture him. Egypt fell, and native rule ended for centuries. This account is more than a dramatic tale. It is a profound piece of historical framing. The later historians who recorded it, like the Roman author Curtius Rufus, were using a deeply Egyptian logic to explain a catastrophic political collapse. A military defeat could be reversed, a bad general could be replaced, but a dream showing a god physically abandoning his temple, that was an irreversible theological catastrophe. It framed the end of an era not as a failure of soldiers or strategy, but as a divine abandonment. The gods had turned their backs, and no human power could stand in the gap. This narrative served a powerful purpose for both the conquered Egyptians and their foreign chroniclers. For Egyptians living under Persian, then Greek, then Roman rule, the story preserved a sense of sacred destiny. Their civilization did not fail because it was weak, it ended because the gods willed it, a tragic but divinely ordained closing of a chapter. For the Greek historians, it was a way to make sense of an ancient, mysterious culture's downfall using terms that culture itself would have understood. The dream of Nectanebo became the official myth of the end, a single night vision used to encapsulate the slow, complex pressures of imperial politics and military inequality. It raises a haunting question: when the last pharaoh dreamed of empty hands, was he seeing a god's departure, or was he finally witnessing the limits of his own power, reflected back at him in the dark? The blueprint for a temple could arrive in a dream. While kings dreamed of conquest, the master builders of Egypt received visions of a different kind, architectural revelations that shaped stone into sacred space. The most famous of these dream-born designs is the magnificent temple of Horus at Edfu. Its own inscribed texts make an extraordinary claim that the entire plan for the temple was not conceived by a human architect, but was revealed in a primordial dream vision. According to the temple walls, the design existed in perfect, divine form from the beginning of time, a celestial blueprint held in the mind of the gods. In a sacred moment, this plan was transmitted through a dream to the temple's human patron or its chief architect, granting them a glimpse of the heavenly original they were to replicate on earth. This was not artistic inspiration, it was divine dictation, a download of sacred geometry meant to create a perfect dwelling for the god. Every column, every corridor, every shrine was believed to be a faithful copy of a vision seen in sleep. This idea transforms the act of construction into a form of waking a dream, of pulling a structure from the realm of the gods into the physical world, stone by heavy stone. Where would such a visionary blueprint be kept once it was received? The likely repository was a per-ankh, a house of life. These were not just libraries, but vibrant scriptorium schools attached to major temples, combining the functions of a university, a publishing house, and a sacred archive. Here, priests and scribes copied and studied medical texts, magical spells, astronomical charts, and architectural manuals. It is easy to imagine a special section within a house of life dedicated to what we might call dream-inspired designs. Rolls of papyrus preserving the details of a column capital seen in a vision, or the precise proportions of a doorway revealed by a god. These would be the working documents, the sacred schematics that guided generations of stonemasons. On a more personal scale, consider an anonymous stone carver, falling asleep after a long day of work. That night he dreams not of a god, but of a single stunning detail, a column that is not just round, but shaped like a tightly closed lotus bud, with petals carved in such a way that they seem to unfurl toward the ceiling. He wakes, sketches the idea, and shows it to the master architect. The design is approved, and a new style of column is born, not from a textbook, but from a sleeping mind's encounter with beauty. This small innovation, repeated and refined over decades, could become a signature of an entire dynasty's architecture. The dream, therefore, operated at every level, from the cosmic master plan delivered to a king or high priest, down to the artisan's flash of ornamental genius. It wove the divine intent directly into the fabric of their cities, making every temple not just a building, but a dream made permanent, a prayer in stone that began in the silence of the night. But the most direct link between dreams and the body lies in a medical text, the Carlsberg Papyrus. This ancient document is not a general dream book. It is a physician's diagnostic manual, where the imagery of your sleep is treated as a symptom list for physical ailment. Within its carefully inked columns, a dream is not a prophecy of the future, but a transparent window into the present condition of your own flesh and blood. The logic is startlingly direct. If you dreamt of swimming in a river, the papyrus might diagnose you with an impending fever, the cool water of the dream symbolically pointing to the heat building in your body. A vision of eating sweet, ripe figs could be read as a warning of a coming digestive disturbance, the pleasant taste in the dream hinting at an imbalance that would soon turn sour in reality. In this system, the dreamscape becomes a literal map of the inner landscape, with every symbol corresponding to a potential malfunction in the physical machine. This practice was rooted in the ancient theory of the four humors, the belief that health depended on a perfect balance of key bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. An excess or deficiency of any one humor would produce specific illnesses and, according to the Carlsberg Papyrus, specific types of dreams. A person with too much black bile, associated with melancholy, might have dark, frightening nightmares of being trapped or buried. Someone with a surfeit of blood, linked to a sanguine temperament, could experience vivid, joyful dreams of feasting and celebration, which the physician might interpret as a sign of potential inflammation or overheating. The dream was the mind's way of reporting the body's internal weather, using symbolic imagery that a trained doctor could decipher. This represents the ultimate fusion of early medical science and spiritual wonderomancy. The priest-interpreter and the physician were, in this context, the same person, using the same text. A patient would describe their troubling dream, and the healer would cross-reference it with the papyrus, not to predict their fortune, but to prescribe a treatment, perhaps a change in diet, a herbal remedy, or a ritual to rebalance the humors. It was a holistic approach that made no distinction between the health of the spirit and the health of the body, because a disturbance in one was always reflected in the other. So the next time you dismiss a strange dream as last night's pizza, an ancient Egyptian doctor might ask you to describe it in detail, believing it held the first, faint clue to an illness still brewing beneath your skin. A nightmare could be a demon, but a dream of a loved one was a visitation. In the quiet of the night, the veil between the living and the dead grew thin, and ancestors could step through to deliver messages, demands, or comfort. These were not symbolic dreams to be interpreted. They were understood as direct conversations, as real as a visit from a neighbor. The dead were not gone. They had simply moved to another neighborhood in the universe, and dreams were the well-trodden path between homes. The most common message from beyond was a request for proper care. A son might dream of his late father, not smiling and peaceful, but appearing gaunt and thirsty, complaining that his tomb offerings had been neglected. In the dream, the ancestor would explicitly instruct the living relative to bring water, bread, and beer to his chapel, to recite the necessary prayers, and to restore the rituals that sustained his spirit in the afterlife. To ignore such a dream visitation was a profound act of familial neglect, risking the ancestors' wrath and the withdrawal of their protective influence over the household. It was a sacred reminder that death did not end obligation. It merely changed the currency of care from physical companionship to ritual sustenance. This belief in ongoing communication gave rise to a remarkable practice, the letters to the dead. These were actual notes, written on pottery or papyrus, addressed directly to a deceased spouse, parent, or child. They were often placed in a tomb or left at a local shrine. The letters mix heartfelt grief with startlingly practical requests. A widow might write to her husband, describing a dream where he appeared to her, and then use that dream as evidence in her plea. She might say, "Since you came to me in my sleep, I know you hear me. Please intervene in the court case over our land. Make the judge see the truth." The dream encounter established the connection, and the letter followed it up with a specific task, treating the deceased as a powerful ally with influence in both worlds. These documents show us that the relationship was seen as reciprocal. the living provided offerings, and the dead provided protection and justice from their new, elevated position. One of the most touching records comes from a woman who found solace in this cycle of dreams and duty. A widow, grieving and struggling to manage the family estate, experienced a series of troubling dreams. She felt lost and burdened by her responsibilities. Then she dreamed of her husband again, but this time he did not ask for anything. He appeared calm and radiant, and he spoke words of reassurance. He told her she was capable, that he was at peace, and that he would watch over her and their children. This dream was meticulously recorded, likely by a temple scribe at her request. For her, it was not a supernatural curiosity, it was therapy. It transformed her paralyzing grief into a sense of ongoing partnership. His message from the afterlife granted her the emotional strength to carry on, reinforcing that their bond, though changed, was unbroken. It provided personal comfort while simultaneously reinforcing the core social fabric, the idea that family duty transcended the grave. This intimate record reminds us that for the Egyptians, dreaming of the dead was rarely about fear. It was about continuity, a nightly council where the wisdom of the past could still guide the present, and where love could find a voice long after the last earthly goodbye. Your own body could betray you in a dream, speaking a language of symbols more urgent than any animal or god. For the ancient Egyptians, the parts of the self were not just flesh and bone, they were vessels for spiritual essence, and to see them altered in a vision was a direct report on the health of your soul and your household. The dream books assigned startlingly specific meanings to these visions of the self. A dream of a large, radiant eye, for instance, was a powerfully good omen. It signaled the direct favor of Horus, the sky god whose all-seeing eye represented wholeness, protection, and royal power. To see such an eye in your sleep meant you were under divine surveillance in the best possible way, your path watched over and your enemies clearly seen. But if the dream eye was injured, clouded, or weeping, the message flipped entirely, predicting a loss of protection, a failure to perceive the truth, or a coming period of grief. The eye was not just a sensory organ, it was a metaphysical camera, and its condition in your dream revealed what the gods were recording about your fate. This logic grew even more chilling when applied to teeth. Dreaming of your teeth falling out, loosening, or crumbling is a near-universal anxiety dream today, often linked to feelings of helplessness or embarrassment. In ancient Egypt, however, the interpretation was terrifyingly concrete. The dream books consistently list this as one of the worst possible signs, a direct prediction of the death of someone in your family or household. This belief, which echoes in superstitions across cultures even now, was rooted in a profound Egyptian dread of bodily disintegration. Teeth were symbols of strength, vitality, and the ability to nourish oneself. To lose them in a dream was not a metaphor for social anxiety. It was a premonition of the family unit losing its vital force, a member being torn from the whole. The body in the dream was a microcosm of the family body, and damage to one foreshadowed damage to the other. The most alarming bodily symbol of all might be the severed hand. To dream of a detached hand, especially if it was your own, pointed to a profound rupture in trust. The interpretation was stark: betrayal. The hand was the instrument of action, of partnership, of giving and receiving. A strong, working hand in a dream could mean success in your endeavors, but a severed one indicated that the agency you trusted, perhaps in a business partner, a family member, or even your own judgment, would be cut off. It warned that an agreement would be broken, that a collaborative effort would fail because someone would withdraw their support, leaving you literally and symbolically unable to complete the task. This symbolism connects directly to the deepest Egyptian spiritual concepts, the Ka and the integrity of the body. The Ka was your vital life force, your spiritual double that needed to be sustained after death. It was intimately tied to your physical form. For the afterlife to function, your body had to be preserved intact through mummification, every part carefully guarded and reassembled. A dream of a severed hand, then, was not just a social warning, it was a spiritual alarm. It hinted at a fragmentation of your very essence, a vulnerability in the integrity that was so crucial for eternal survival. Such a dream suggested that the connections holding your world together, both socially and spiritually, were under threat of being permanently severed. So the next time you recall a dream about your own body, ask yourself an Egyptian question. Was it a report on your spiritual wholeness, or a warning that a piece of your world was about to go missing? A supervisor's praise could be a fleeting moment, but to dream of it was a hope etched in clay. While pharaohs carved their divine visions in stone and scribes kept formal manuals on papyrus, the most intimate dream records of ancient Egypt were written on broken pieces of pottery. These ostraca, the scrap paper of the ancient world, offer a raw, unfiltered look into the minds of common workers. In the village of Deir el-Medina, where the tomb builders lived, a man might finish his daily wine, pick up a discarded shard from his floor, and use a reed pen to jot down the strange vision that had haunted his sleep. These were not interpretations from a master, but personal memoranda, a way to hold onto the message before it faded with the morning sun. One surviving ostracan records a simple, poignant hope. A craftsman dreamed that his work supervisor stood before him and offered lavish, public praise for his skill and diligence. The dreamer, upon waking, carefully wrote this down. He did not analyze it through a dream book. His recording was the analysis. By preserving the vision, he was willing it into reality, treating the dream as a preview of a promotion or a raise he desperately wanted. It was a private prayer for recognition, made solid on a piece of broken jar. Other fragments reveal the mundane anxieties of communal life. One worker dreamed of a heated argument with his neighbor over a shared wall, a common source of friction in the cramped village. Another recorded a dream about a missing tool, a nightmare of professional helplessness that would resonate with any tradesperson today. There is a heartbreaking simplicity to these accounts. They are not about crocodiles or gods, but about social standing, daily conflict, and job security. The very medium tells a story. Papyrus was expensive, imported, and required careful preparation. To use it, you generally needed a formal reason or professional status, but a pottery shard was everywhere, free, and disposable. The choice to use an ostracan means the act of recording the dream was spontaneous and deeply personal. It was not for an archive or a priest, but for the dreamer alone, a way to grapple with the subconscious worries that even a society steeped in divine meaning could not fully soothe. These scratched messages remind us that for all the grand theology of dreams as divine broadcasts, for the average person, they were also a mirror. They reflected the quiet ambitions and simmering tensions of trying to get by, to be respected, and to find a little security in an uncertain world. The worker who dreamed of praise was not just wondering what the gods thought, he was wondering what his boss thought, and hoping with all his heart that the night had given him the answer. A new god arrived, speaking the language of dreams to two worlds at once. As Greek culture flowed into Egypt with the conquests of Alexander, a profound fusion began, not just of people, but of their deepest spiritual technologies. From this meeting emerged Serapis, a deity deliberately crafted to bridge the divide. He possessed the serene, bearded visage of a Greek father god like Zeus or Hades, yet his powers were quintessentially Egyptian, rooted in the ancient arts of healing and the afterlife. The Thutmose, the Greek dynasty now ruling Egypt, promoted him as a unifying figure, and his primary domain became the very space where Egyptian tradition was strongest, the world of sleep and cure. Serapis did not replace the old gods of dreams, he streamlined them, becoming the premier, one-stop deity for anyone seeking a healing vision, whether they prayed in Greek or Egyptian. His rise marked the moment Egyptian dream culture went global, transforming a local practice into an international pilgrimage. The heart of his cult beat at the Serapeum of Saqqara, an incubation complex of staggering scale built near the ancient necropolis. This was not a single temple, but a sprawling sanctuary where the sacred and the scientific merged. Pilgrims entered a world designed for divine contact, with dormitories, bathing facilities for ritual purification, and spaces for offerings. At its center lay the temple proper, housing a magnificent cult statue of Serapis, believed to be so infused with divine presence that it could sweat or move. But the true magic happened in the adjoining incubation chambers. Here, in the shadow of the Pyramid of Djoser, seekers would lie down on sacred skins, much as their Egyptian ancestors had done for millennia. now awaiting a visitation from this new, hybrid god. The Serapis was a spiritual hospital where the diagnosis and prescription came in the form of a dream, and its reputation for miraculous cures drew people from across the Mediterranean. What makes the Serapis so revealing are the voices left behind, scratched into the walls and recorded on papyri by the pilgrims themselves. These are not formal royal decrees, but personal testimonials of pain and relief. We find inscriptions in crisp Greek lettering next to demotic Egyptian script, all telling similar stories. A Greek soldier from Alexandria records a dream where Serapis touched his wounded leg, and he awoke able to walk. An Egyptian priest from Thebes gives thanks for a vision that cured his daughter's fever. A merchant from Rhodes describes being led through a symbolic dream by the god, which a temple interpreter translated into a specific herbal remedy. These records show a seamless, practical syncretism. The pilgrims did not argue theology, they shared a universal human experience, suffering, and they came to the same place, using the same ritual, to seek the same result, a curative dream. The god's origin was a political invention, but the healing they experienced felt profoundly real. This multicultural traffic through the dream chambers of Saqqara represents the evolution of a 3,000-year-old tradition. The Egyptian understanding of dreams as real encounters with the divine proved irresistibly exportable. The framework of incubation, purification, and symbolic prescription remained intact, but now it was delivered through a deity who wore a familiar face to foreign visitors. Serapis became the friendly, accessible interface for a very ancient and powerful operating system. The practice shed some of its exclusively pharaonic symbolism, becoming more universal in its appeal, yet it never lost its core Egyptian soul, the unshakable belief that in sleep, the boundary between the human and the divine dissolved, and healing could walk right through. The lines outside the Serapis proved that whether you called the god Serapis or Osiris, whether you wrote in Greek or hieroglyphs, the desire to find meaning and medicine in the dark was a language everyone understood. The fear of nightmares did not end with death, it merely changed its address. In the silent journey through the Jewat, the Egyptian underworld, the soul faced landscapes more surreal than any sleeping vision, and the dangers there were eternal. To prepare for this, the funerary spells known as the Coffin Texts, inscribed inside the wooden caskets of nobles, included specific protections against a threat we might find astonishing: bad dreams in the afterlife. One spell declares, "I have driven off the storm cloud of sleep for this noble one, so that he shall not see a bad dream in his slumber." This reveals a profound belief. The state of the dead was not one of pure wakefulness, but of a kind of perpetual, vulnerable dreaming. The spells served as a permanent nightlight against the demonic figures that could infiltrate the soul's rest, ensuring the deceased would not be tormented by chaotic visions as they navigated toward rebirth. The afterlife itself was conceived as a dreamlike realm, a place of shifting forms and symbolic challenges, where the soul's perception was its primary tool for survival. This connection between dreams and the journey of the dead grew even more explicit in the New Kingdom, with the magnificent illustrated scrolls of the Book of the Dead. While not every copy contained it, a fascinating chapter sometimes appears, a literal dream book for the deceased. This was not a guide for the living, but a manual for the soul, providing interpretations for the visions and encounters it would experience in the Jewat. If the soul saw a certain god in a certain form, the chapter explained what that meant for its progress. If it witnessed a celestial event or a strange animal, the text decoded the omen. It treated the underworld journey as an extended, high-stakes dream sequence that the soul had to correctly interpret in order to pass through each gate and haul successfully. This creates a breathtaking symmetry. Just as a living Egyptian used a dream book to navigate the symbolic messages of the night for daily life, the dead soul used a dream book to navigate the symbolic trials of eternity. The ultimate goal was to reach the field of reeds, the perfect afterlife, but to get there, one had to cross a realm that operated on the logic of a dream, where a wrong interpretation could mean oblivion. This framework allows us to see the most famous moment in the Book of the Dead, the weighing of the heart ceremony, in a new light. The soul stands before Osiris, its heart placed on a scale against the feather of truth. This is the ultimate anxiety dream, a moment of profound judgment stripped bare. But the spells and amulets the deceased carried, like the heart scarab inscribed with a plea not to testify against its owner, were the equivalent of a protective dream ritual. They were tools to ensure the soul's vision of the divine court ended favorably, to turn a potential nightmare of condemnation into a dream of justification and welcome. In the end, the Egyptian vision of existence formed a perfect, endless loop. Life was a waking interval between two great dream states, the prenatal existence in the cosmic waters of Nun and the post-mortem journey through the Duat. Death was not an end to dreaming, but an entrance into its most permanent and consequential phase. The prayers for peaceful sleep in this life were rehearsals for the eternal sleep of the next, and every interpreted dream was practice for the final exam of the soul. Far to the south in the holy city of Napata, a Kushite king received a vision of power. The Dream Stela of King el-Medina tells of a night when the lion-headed warrior god Apidamak, a distinctly Kushite deity, strode into the royal sleep. The god did not speak in riddles, he acted. In the dream, Apidamak personally handed the king a sword and a shield, direct and potent symbols of martial strength. His promise was equally straightforward. With these divine weapons, victory in battle was assured. This was not a subtle prophecy about harvests or legitimacy. It was a divine armory delivery, a god equipping his chosen champion for imminent war. The stela, erected to commemorate this event, shows how thoroughly the Kushite rulers of the 25th dynasty had absorbed the Egyptian language of divine dreams, yet remixed it for their own cultural soundtrack. They used the same medium, the carved stone monument, and the same core belief, that gods communicate through sleep, but they populated the visions with their own pantheon. Where an Egyptian pharaoh might dream of Horus or Ammon, a Kushite king dreamed of Apidamak, the fierce lion god, or the ram-headed Ammon of Jebel Barkal, a localized version of the Egyptian supreme god. This adaptation was a masterstroke of political and spiritual messaging. By recording their dreams on stelae in the Egyptian style, they claimed the same divine right to rule that the pharaohs enjoyed, wrapping their authority in a recognized, sacred tradition. Yet by featuring their own gods, they asserted their unique identity and independence, proving that the divine hotline was not exclusive to the Egyptian valley. It broadcast in Nubia, too, on a different frequency. The imagery itself carries a different weight. Compare el-Medina's dream of receiving weapons to Thutmose IV's dream of a negotiation with the Sphinx. One is a transaction of tools for an immediate, physical conflict. The other is a symbolic deal for political power. Both are about securing kingship, but the Kushite version feels more visceral, more directly tied to the raw assertion of control through force, reflecting perhaps the realities of ruling a powerful, militarized kingdom on Egypt's southern frontier. These stelae were more than personal religious records. They were diplomatic documents in stone, communicating to both their Nubian subjects and their Egyptian neighbors that their rule was woven into the very fabric of the divine, just as securely as any native pharaohs. The dream, therefore, became a universal currency of power, a format so compelling that an entire neighboring civilization adopted it, then minted their own version. It makes you wonder, if a dream could legitimize a foreign dynasty, how far could this idea travel, and what would it become in the hands of an empire that saw the entire Mediterranean as its backyard? The ancient priests saw dreams as divine broadcasts, but a modern therapist might call them internal projections. This collision of worldviews begins with two towering figures in the study of the mind, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung. Both were deeply fascinated by ancient dream symbolism, seeing in Egyptian records a precursor to their own work. Freud, who famously called dreams the royal road to the unconscious, would have viewed the crocodile and the falling tooth not as omens, but as symbols of repressed desires and deep-seated anxieties. For him, the bizarre imagery was a coded language of the individual psyche, not a message from Sobek or Horus. Carl Jung went even further, believing these ancient symbols were not personal, but universal. He called them archetypes, primal patterns embedded in the collective unconscious of all humanity. To Jung, the Egyptian who dreamed of a solar falcon soaring and the modern person dreaming of flying might be tapping into the same archetype of transcendence and spiritual ascent. The gods themselves, in this view, become personifications of powerful internal forces, like the nurturing mother Isis or the wise father Thoth. This creates a fascinating bridge across millennia. The ancient interpreter, with his dream book and his title of Master of the Secret Things, was performing a function that looks remarkably like therapy. A villager arrives, trembling, after a nightmare of being chased. He recounts his vision to the priest, who listens intently, consults his texts, and delivers a verdict. The demon is named, a protective ritual is prescribed, a spell is written for under the pillow. The villager leaves with a plan, a tangible action to combat his fear. His terror, once formless and overwhelming, has been contained within a known cultural framework and given a solution. Whether the threat was a real Sebao demon or a manifestation of his own stress about harvest failure, the psychological effect is the same, a reduction of anxiety, a restoration of a sense of control. The symbolic system provided a narrative for suffering and a script for healing. So we must ask, did it work? In a very real sense, it likely did. The placebo effect is a powerful modern confirmation that belief can alter physiology. If a person truly believed that whispering a nightmare into a water pot at dawn and smashing it would break the dream's curse, the catharsis alone could bring profound relief. The ritual gave physical form to mental anguish so it could be physically destroyed. The dream letter to a god transformed helpless fear into active complaint, a psychologically healthy move from victimhood to agency. The interpretations, however strange, offered meaning where there was chaos, and in a world filled with unseen threats, meaning is the first step toward peace. This suggests the bizarre records are less about magic and more about the universal human condition. The ancient Egyptian, lying awake after a dream of teeth crumbling, was not so different from us lying awake with a nameless dread about our family's security. They feared illness, longed for love, and worried about their place in the world. Their framework was magical, ours is scientific, but the raw concerns are timeless. Their dream books, then, are not just lists of odd predictions, they are maps of the human heart, charting the same emotional terrain we still navigate today. Only they believed the landmarks were gods and demons, while we might call them neuroses and archetypes. The real revelation is not that they were wrong, but that they were so determined to listen, to find a pattern in the noise of the night, and to use that pattern to mend the fractures in their waking lives. From royal prophecies carved in stone to a worker's hope for praise scratched on broken pottery, this journey reveals a civilization that refused to dismiss the night. The bizarre and profound world of Egyptian dream records shows a people deeply engaged with the subconscious, building an entire system of order to confront the chaos of sleep. They turned their beds into fortresses, their temples into clinics, and their dreams into legal testimony, all in a relentless quest to pull meaning from the dark. This was not mere superstition, it was a comprehensive philosophy of existence, where every strange vision was a piece of a larger, divine conversation. It speaks to a fundamental human need, the drive to understand the unknown, to find patterns in randomness, and to believe that even our most fleeting thoughts carry weight. The Egyptians listened to their dreams with a seriousness we have largely lost, treating the sleeping mind not as a random generator, but as the most important meeting room they had. So the next time you wake from a puzzling or powerful dream, take a moment. What ancient symbol might it hold? Share your weirdest dream in the comments below, and subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries that shaped our world. Perhaps, after all, those masters of the secret things were onto something, and our nightly visions still have something profound to say, if only we remember how to listen.